Alright, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Polyglot Grind once again as always. So in this video I'm going to talk about how my Chinese is garbage now, but I'm still able to make myself understood. Well, at least from my experience, Chinese people seem to be able to understand me, and I'm still able to understand a good deal of what they say to me. So the reasoning behind that is because I chose a high input based approach when I decided to learn Mandarin Chinese. So a brief glance into my Chinese history. I started learning Chinese in 2011. I started off with podcasts, if I remember correctly, and then I was informed about like a Chinese class that was every Saturday. So I signed up for that class, and then I would study Chinese 3 hours every Saturday. So every Saturday I was studying Chinese. And then as a native English speaker, Chinese is like a challenge. It's very different. So I remember we started off with really basic things. We had like a little work booklet, and then it was really basic things. So we started off with that, and then I decided to take my learning into my own hands, which is what I like to do back then with foreign languages. I did that with French too back in high school too. So I decided to go on Link and also memorize.com, and I also remember I used to go to the library because I wanted to study Chinese in a quiet environment because it was so different. So I wanted to be able to focus more. So I would go to the library, and then I remember the library computers would auto kick you out after an hour of 14 minutes. So as much as this is a very random amount of time to study for, I would study Chinese for an hour and 14 minutes every single day on Link and Memorize, but I focused on Link. And Link is a website that is very useful for learning languages. If you're in the language learning community, then you've probably heard of Link, or you probably use it, but if you're not, it's lingq.com. It's a very good website. I use that for pretty much every language that I ever learned, if they have it on Link. They don't have all the languages, like for example, they didn't have Catalan, so I couldn't use Link for Catalan, but Link is a website that I use to greatly increase my vocabulary in foreign languages. So I would study for an hour and 14 minutes every single day, and I would get a lot of input. So I'd be studying at the library, and then I'd be on, I used to take the bus back then, so like on the bus to the library and on the bus back, I'd be listening to Chinese podcasts, so that was more input. And when I got home, I found like a Taiwanese website that had all these different Chinese shows, so I would watch those. So I created my own immersion in Canada. It was like a Chinese immersion in Canada. So it was like I was, not always, but I was surrounded by Chinese a great deal of the time because I was always exposing myself to it. So I got a huge amount of input. So I didn't really get that many opportunities to speak Chinese back then because I would always have to venture kind of far away or go to Chinese restaurants, and I didn't want to like disturb them. So the only times I could really practice speaking Chinese was when I was ordering food, or if I went to like Toronto or some other different city or whatever, because like there's a large population of Chinese people there. So there was that. I wasn't getting that much output, but I was getting a significant amount of input. And I kept up this high input based approach for about 2 years, I think. I studied Chinese seriously from 2011, which is when I started that class, until 2013, which is when I got bored and then I stopped. So that was 2 years of like intensive input, and I haven't seriously studied Chinese long term since 2013, but I'm still able to make myself understood, and I'm still able to understand a good deal of what's said to me. And that's because I took a high input based approach. And what high input based approaches do is, like, because you're getting so much input, your long-term memory retains a lot more of it. So even after all these years, I'm still able to go out and speak Chinese because I got so much input. So if you're learning a language, not obviously everybody has different approaches and stuff, but I would personally recommend a high input based approach because I've neglected Chinese since 2013, but I'm still able to speak it. Not very well, obviously. Like back in those days, I remember I could even think in Chinese, and I would speak without having to like think about what I was saying, and it was a lot easier. Now I struggle a lot, obviously. I forget words, and I have to think about what I say. Sometimes I have to translate from English, but I can still speak after all these years of not using it. So if you want to maintain a language long term, get a lot of input while you're studying or at the beginning, and try to keep that up for as long as you can, because it'll help you out in the long run. And then you can honestly stop, and then because you put so much time and effort and you got so much input at the beginning and throughout your learning process, when you get bored or you decide to move on to a different language, or you have to stop for whatever reason, you'll retain a lot of it because you got so much input at the very beginning. So that is the message of this video. Just get as much input as possible, and high input based approaches work very well, and I'm living proof of that because I'm still able to speak Chinese on I don't know, like, I'm a very humble person. I would say it's alright on a decent level. So try to get as much input as possible, and that should help you out in the long run. It'll let you relax later on. Like obviously you should always keep learning the language. You should never really stop. But if you get a lot of input at the beginning and you stop for whatever reason, then you should retain a lot more than if you just studied a little bit and didn't get that much input in and then you had to stop. Because in that case you probably forget quite a bit, or most of it. Anyway, get as much input as possible. And I just remember this part now. This is a pretty good example. When I was learning Danish, I took a low input based approach. My original original goal was to take a high input based approach, but I couldn't find that many sources through which I could be exposed to Danish. Like, I would read my Danish ASMA book with the audio and stuff, but Link doesn't have Danish, and I couldn't really find that many podcasts in Danish or anything I could really bring with me. So I didn't get that much exposure to Danish. I didn't get that much input either. So now, even though I stopped studying Danish. I'm not sure exactly when I stopped learning Danish, but it wasn't that long ago. It was just a couple months ago. But I've forgotten a good deal of it. If I were to be walking outside and a Danish person approached me and spoke to me in Danish, I'd probably be able to understand what they were saying, at least a little bit. I'd probably struggle a lot. But if I were to try and respond or speak back, that'd be really difficult because I got hardly any input. So even now, after just a couple of months, I've forgotten most of it. Like, I can still understand a bit, as I just mentioned, but I can't respond. I've forgotten a lot. And this is a good comparison to my Chinese, because with Chinese, as I said at the beginning of the video, I got a lot of input, and now after several years I'm still able to speak. But with Danish, where I used a low input based approach and stopped studying just a couple months ago, I've forgotten almost everything. So that's the difference. A high input based approach will allow you to retain stuff for longer, and a low input based approach will probably cause you to forget stuff very early on, which is my experience with Danish. But anyway, this is now the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and yeah, more videos to come soon.